Hey, hey, hey. So we are back with another Old Testament study. We're starting at verse 5. I'm not sure where we're going, although you probably can tell by the thumbnail, which I will be doing after I do this. But as we're recording this, I don't remember where we ended off, what verse. I think it was 10 or 11. Um, so um, you like I said, you'll be able to tell by the thumbnail. So I guess that is that again, as always, we're gonna get stuff on the scripture, and then we'll hit rabbit trails, of course, because you know what would this show be without rabbit trails? I'm not sure of all the rabbit trails that we're gonna go down. I forget because I record these intros and the outros after we've actually done it. But so that's why I know some of it and don't know some of it. Depends on all what I can remember. And unfortunately, it's been a couple weeks since we recorded this one with me doing the intro, so I'm doing it a bit late. So, anyways, I've yammered on enough. On with us. Hello, and me talking about Genesis and going through Genesis 5 through whatever. So, thanks. There we go. We're recording now.
Great.
Okay. And although I do think I have to change this window here to get us both in. There we go.
Are we ready?
Yeah, I guess so. So I guess are we in Genesis again, or
We
are
are.
we going to continue our trip down?
Oh no. No. Last year we did the whole. We read the whole thing. I think this year I just gave it a little overview. I think it's fine.
Yeah.
Uh, so we're gonna do pick up from Genesis 1:5.
Okay.
Rick, I want to warn you. Today's discussion is going to make your eyes flutter, and it is going to smack your gobs.
It is.
That is what's going to happen today, and that's just the
Okay.
way it is. There's nothing I can
Now,
do about it.
I got a question. What are gobs? What are my gobs?
I don't know, but people get really gobsmacked sometimes. So something smacks their gobs. I don't know what it is, but something does. I don't know what that gobs is. But anyway,
Or am I gonna get godsmacked?
that might sting. I don't know.
Depends on how hard he does it.
Yeah. Well, he just hold back sometimes. Like, hey,
Yeah, he can be gentle, but he can be harsh.
that's right.
Depends
All
what you
right.
need at any given time.
All righty. Let's get this going.
Okay.
So we're gonna start with Genesis 1:5 because weeks and weeks and weeks ago we finished Genesis 1:4. So now we're gonna see how far we can get today. So today is the creation of light, or actually it's the naming of light. Says God called the light day and the darkness he called night. It was evening and it was morning one day. And so the interesting thing is the commentator tells me here that light was created out of darkness. How do you figure that?
God.
Well, I mean, obviously, but from the text, how do you
Yeah.
how do you, how do you get that from the text?
That light was. Well, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Am I getting too far ahead, or was that in
No,
1 through 4? And
no.
here comes my mom.
Hello,
Hello,
Hello.
hello.
how are you?
And yes, how are you?
I'm pretty good.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear it.
Okay,
I,
so
I yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna try and get back into things.
So in 1:3 it says God said, "Let there be light," and there was light.
Like,
Okay, that's what you're referring to, right?
yeah. So you were saying out of darkness came light.
Light was created from darkness. That's what the commentator says. God formed the light out of darkness itself.
I'm not sure whether I agree with that, but
Well, let's think about it. Let's think
yeah.
about it. So, at So where does
Yeah.
so
Uh,
what exactly is the language here? Let's look at 1:4. It
uh,
says, right, God saw the light that it was good, and God divided between the light and between the darkness.
yeah.
Okay, so we know one thing. The first thing we know is that at 1:4, dark and light are mixed together.
Yeah.
Okay? Now the first before that says God said, let there be light, right?
Yeah.
The verse before that says the earth was chaos and void with darkness on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God floated, right? So darkness is already there.
Yeah.
So
On
if
the
we go,
face of the deep, whatever the face of the deep
yeah,
is.
we won't go back into that. We already covered that. But here's my point. My point is darkness, right, exists here.
Yeah.
The next verse it says, let there be light. The next verse after that says, God saw the light was good, and he divided between the light and between the darkness. So what does that imply?
Yeah, I guess it could imply that they were somewhat mixed, or there was. He had to divide them somehow.
Right, but if they but in verse 2,
Yeah.
it's only darkness.
Yeah.
And in verse 5 or verse 4, he's separating between the two of them.
Yeah.
Okay? So at some point between verse 2 and verse 4, light and dark got mixed together.
Although that seems. To our minds, anyways, our feeble little minds, it seems
Well,
a little whacked
well,
that you
I
can
mean,
mix them together.
well, we see it every day. When the sun goes down, there's a mixture of light and darkness at night, in the evening, and in the
Yeah.
morning, there's also a mixture of light and darkness when the sun is coming up.
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
Your mom is quietly leaving.
Yeah. Well, she can't hear anything, so
Oh, okay.
with me having the headphones on, because although I probably wouldn't get any feedback with us just talking, but now she's back.
I never really left.
Yeah. Okay, so anyways, go on.
So first off, I want to see if you're with me so far. Are you with me so far?
Yeah, I can sort of see, sun rising. Although that's, with a planet and the orbiting, because the sun is always producing light, we just don't necessarily see it.
Well, I
Uh,
think I think we're missing the point.
yeah,
The point is not, do we see examples of light and darkness being mixed together? The point is this commentator right? Did light come out of darkness?
it would seem that way, but somehow I
Oh,
would.
you can't agree, can you? You can't bring yourself to admit the possibility that maybe light came out of darkness.
Well, to my mind, it seems a little whacked because usually light overtakes the darkness.
And vice versa.
Eh, Usually, you have to shut off the light for the darkness to encroach. If the light is there, it
Depends
cannot
on how strong the
encroach.
light is. Depends
Yeah,
on how strong the light is, right? So, but look, I'm making this point because from a text standpoint, it
yeah.
seems like a pretty strong point. It seems like they're not saying anything weird. Let's put it that way. I'm not going to force you to agree.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not forcing you to agree. All I want you to admit to is that textually, from the text of the Torah, the person who the commentator who's writing here is not speaking crazy. Can you
Oh,
admit to that?
I can admit to that, I guess.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, good. All right, good. So he's not speaking crazy. So there is a possibility that the light was created out of the darkness. Okay. Now this becomes kind of important because this then becomes an explanation. So this whole thing, God called the light day and the darkness he called night. It was evening, it was morning one day. So now it gets into some Jewy stuff. And I say Jewy stuff because you probably don't care about this, but it's kind of important to us, right? And that's what it says. And is therefore possible to call night day. So we can call night day because of what's happening here, right? With the fact that
Yeah.
light was created from the darkness. So he's saying because light was created from the darkness, therefore we can call night day because it came out of that, right? So
Yeah. I get
right,
where he's saying, yeah. And
right,
technically in some ways we do because, you get we call the whole day, although we don't refer to the sunshine part of it, like Wednesday from, 12 midnight to the next 12 midnight is all Wednesday. That's
right,
all one day to, at
right.
least to modern people. I'm not sure so much for people, 3,000 years ago, whether they would have considered it all one day.
Well, this is coming to tell you what we do. We consider it one day,
Yeah,
and so this thus, for example, in the Sabbath evening prayers, we say the Sabbath day, even though we're praying at night when it's dark outside.
yeah,
So when we're praying in the synagogue, right, Friday night, we're calling it the Sabbath day,
yeah,
even though it's night outside. So this is what he's even though. Oh, similarly, on the eve of new moon, Rosh Chodesh, we say this day of the new moon, even though we start Rosh Chodesh in the evening,
yeah,
and that's what we say this day of Rosh Chodesh. The same is true of all other festivals. It might seem logical to change the wording to say so, to say this night of the Sabbath or the night of the new moon. But since light was created from the substance of darkness, it is appropriate to call darkness day. For this reason, the Torah states it was evening and it was morning one day. It does not say the first day,
uh,
and it
uh,
subsequently states the second day and the third day. The intent is to reach that both day and night considered one day.
uh,
So that's the point. He brings out from this that he feels like the most important thing here is that we recognize that night and day can be considered day.
yeah.
Now, like I said, this is the Jewish section of this discussion because
Eh,
you probably don't care about this,
Well,
but
I get it,
it's interesting,
and
right? You know,
I get it definitely, and as I sort of just said, even we nowadays, you know, consider like from midnight to midnight, one day.
yeah.
So it care about it. It works even with to today's thought process to most people, I would say.
Hmm.
It might get nighttime, and some people say good night instead of good day. But
Right,
you could still leave somebody 10 at night and say good day,
right.
or
So
welcome them and say good day, and it wouldn't be inappropriate to
only if you're angry, then you say, "I say good day to you, sir."
yeah,
That's the only time it's appropriate.
yeah. But if you said, 10 o'clock in the morning, good night to somebody, they'd be
Right.
looking at
It'd
you
be
pretty
weird.
weird.
Right, right,
So
right. Okay.
I see how it can, go with that aspect for sure. And I think most people else could. I'd ask my mom, but she can't hear a thing.
What?
Doesn't matter.
Well, ask her. You got a curiosity.
Okay.
You can't do this to your poor mother.
She's here, so she gets teased. She doesn't want to get teased. She doesn't be here.
Remember, Rick, kavod av aim. Honor your father and your mother. Right?
uh,
Respect your mother and your father. Right?
I think she would say I honor and respect her.
For the most part.
For the most part. Okay. Well, I guess that's what we can go with. That's good enough, I guess.
Well, I think that's probably the way most of us do. And then I guess it comes down to what you might consider honor and respect and all that too. You know.
Okay. Well, the next thing that the commentator wants to get into is that he says, like, so how many things were created on the first day of creation? And so he says, some people say 8 days, 8 things were created. Some say that everything was made by God on the first day. So this, if you remember, we were talking about the Ramban at the beginning. The Ramban talks about how everything was created in potential, and
Yeah.
that the subsequent days was just taking that potential and then taking it from like an idea or whatever, and giving it form and shape, and sort of separating things out. Process of separation.
Yeah.
But everything already exists. Everything, the potential for everything's already existent, and so
Yeah.
that's one of the positions. There's a question whether the angels were created on the first day or the second day.
Yeah.
You would think they would be created on the first day because those are part of the heavens, right? The angels are
Yeah.
part of the heavens. But some say no, the angels aren't created on the first day, and the reason
Yeah.
why is so that nobody would mistakenly believe that the angels helped God in the process of creation
Yeah.
on that first day.
Yeah.
God Himself took care of it, and He did it. Therefore, they were created on the second day. That's one idea,
Yeah. I know there's ideas that they were probably even created later than the second day too.
right? So He says. So He says the only living thing that was possibly created on the first day was the angel of death. And He says, why? Why was that? Well, because what's the job of the angel of death? To destroy, not to create. So we
Yeah.
would never think the angel of death helps with creation because what he does is destroy things.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
I mean, those are some interesting back and forth. I think about that. I don't
yeah.
want to get overly
Yeah.
uh, involved in that, but I think it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. And not to go on too much of a rabbit hole, for the angel of death, I probably wouldn't say that would. I shouldn't say create it so much as assign the task um, after the fall, because I don't believe there was death believed before the fall, at least.
Really? Well, Rick, explain something to me. Explain something to me, Rick. I demand it. All right. If there
Okay.
was no death before what you call the fall, then why do they have to eat from the tree of life?
That I don't know. Well,
Oh,
well, they, well, I don't think it says they had to. They could. Because they were just commanded not to eat from one tree. They weren't commanded to eat from the tree of life
but it's
either.
called the tree. But it's called the tree of life. So what is the? So why would you need the tree of life?
For after the fall, I'm not sure. you know because
Yeah.
well, we do know after the fall, and I guess we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves here, is one of the reasons that he did kick them out of the garden is so they wouldn't eat from the tree of life.
Right.
To
It applies immortality.
yeah.
If they ate from it, they have immortality. But the thing is that um, in the garden, he says that regarding eating the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, he says on the day of which you
eh,
eat it, right, you'll die, right?
Yeah.
So when they eat of the tree, did they die?
Not right that second, but
No.
they might have assumed, oh, that they would die right that second. Did they even have the real concept of death like we do nowadays too?
Well, that's a good question. The answer is probably no.
Yeah.
In fact, that was part of the problem with Cain and Abel was that they'd never seen death before. They didn't really understand it, and so when Cain accidentally killed Abel, we think it's like maybe an accident. He didn't do it maliciously because in order for him to have a malicious intent in killing his brother, he has to know what death is. He has to have experienced it. So Cain is in a very unique position
Well,
where
he might have
murder don't
experienced
happen.
slightly, not in like human to human, but did they not kill animals at this point, for clothing or whatever?
So, not really. No, like the midrash gives this idea that actually they don't start eating meat until after the flood of Noah.
Yeah, that I agree with, but God did, at the after the fall, did kill a couple of animals and make
Wait a
clothes.
second. Where does it
Uh,
say he killed some animals? Where does he say that?
I'm not sure he said. somewhere after the fall, before they're kicked out of the
But
garden.
no, I think we were no,
Well,
I think what you're referring to
maybe
is the
maybe
skin.
killed's too harsh of a word, but you know,
Well,
he
I
made
think you're
he made skins for them. So I guess the assumption there is, some animal had to
Die.
be die or be sacrificed to make
not
their
not
clothes. No,
no,
it's
actually,
God. He could have miraculously just made them. Yes.
sure. Well, actually, you don't need to kill an animal because you have this thing called a nachash, a snake, and what are snakes known for doing?
Shedding their skin.
Shedding their skin.
Yeah,
And so we had a snake in the garden who apparently could talk and at one point had arms and legs. So he would have been a pretty good he would have been pretty useful for making skins. That's my theory. My theory is that he got the skins from the snake.
yeah. Or you could, like make, you shed wool from sheep. So I guess, although that's not skin, so
Right. Well,
but
I
it's a way of making clothes.
sure. I just think that what you do there is look, you and I think we have kind of two different ways of approaching the Torah.
Yeah.
Like I think you'll have to tell me exactly. I always think that Christians, when they read the Bible, they read it like what the text says is what I go by.
Uh,
Whereas when we read the Bible, we go by, well, we have the text and we also have our tradition, our oral interpretations
uh,
and stories.
I would say for the most part that's correct how Christians read the Bible, Old Testament, whatever is. But we do realize sometimes there's some allegory or metaphor in there too, some figurative stuff. And,
Sure.
sometimes there's some hidden stuff like, most Christians that don't give it a second thought wouldn't think about that before the flood that humans didn't eat meat, you know. I don't think. And that most likely that the animals talked before the flood or maybe even just in the garden area.
Sure.
Because of course, the serpent comes up to Eve and starts talking. If she's never seen an animal talk or heard an animal talk before, although I can't really get in her mindset being, in
Well,
that
look,
naivete for lack of a bit different best way it
there
is.
is a possibility that this whole story is allegory. Like,
Mm.
I know that's uncomfortable, but I'm just saying that there is a possibility
Yeah.
that ultimately, what do we get out of this? Do we get anything more out of this? It being meant to be taken literally than we do we get being taken allegorically. After all, what we really always focus on with the story of the Garden of Eden and the first sin and all that is that we take lessons from it, and that's what
Yeah.
allegory is very good at is
Yeah.
teaching lessons. So whether it actually happened or didn't happen doesn't affect the truthfulness of the lessons that we learned from that particular part.
No.
Um, Now there are other things where I think it would be very hard to take it as allegory. Like if you took in the stories of like Abraham and Isaac and the characters that we have in the Torah, I think then if you try to take that as allegory, I think you sort of you're breaking the system a little bit.
Yeah. Well, the thing that would make me think not that for allegory for the garden, anyways, is
Yeah.
that he kicked them out. He was supposed to have placed an angel there to protect the entrance, so they couldn't get back in to get to the tree of life.
So for the last nearly 6,000 years of human history, has anyone reported wanting across an angel that nearly killed them for going into the Garden of Eden?
No, now, well, with the flood, it could have been really hidden too.
That's
So
true.
and
There is an
and
idea that
that
it went underground. Sure,
Yeah,
I can see that.
because we can't, as you remember, well, no, it said there's four rivers that came out. We can find two of them now. Are they just rivers that were renamed the same names from before the flood?
I mean, it's hard to know like what would a universal flood do to the land.
Yeah, it would
Right?
it change it
I,
dramatically.
right. So it could be that those two rivers don't exist after the flood, or it could be they're underground, or I don't know. It could be a lot
Y-
of different things, I
Yeah,
guess.
there's a lot of different,
Right,
theories out there.
right. There's a lot of theories up there. Well, I just pointed out because, like, I think
Yeah,
sometimes, um, like, the reason it's good to recognize the possibility of this being allegory is because to the modern mind, it seems kind of absurd, some of it,
yeah,
And I'm not saying that therefore we should just, make it seem less absurd by just throwing allegory at it. But I'm saying
yeah,
that there have been very respectable people, very knowledgeable, very holy people over the centuries who have said they understand this to be allegory, and I don't know that there's any reason not to go with that. I tend to think about it more literally, but um, but I'm not. But if it turns out that it is allegory, it wouldn't really affect me very much.
yeah. Well, plus people, the other thing that I would say that would mean it shouldn't most likely is an allegory is, people had to start for somewhere, it's the history of the human race, if you will, just with, the two people that God created, you know.
Okay.
I think if you take it not as allegory, to me, I think it tends to lean a little bit more towards, you can make things lean towards more quote unquote evolution. And that's my opinion. And I don't think either of us believes in evolution, not so much microevolution. There's changes in kinds and all that, but dogs will always be dogs. They'll never turn into something different.
I'll tell you my general take on science that moves beyond what we can observe is that it's pretty unreliable,
Yeah,
and you know, but I'm not a scientist, and
yeah,
I can't say that with any sort of like
yeah,
confidence. I can only say it from what I observe, myself, is that the, even with things that we directly observe, science sometimes is still wrong.
yeah,
And so if we can be wrong about things we can actually physically see with our eyes, then they can certainly be wrong about things that we can't see with our eyes. And the theory of evolution is a theory
mm,
that is created to yes,
mm,
explain certain facts, certain observations, but by no means does the theory of evolution exhaust the possibilities of the evidence that we see. So I don't really think it matters, and
yeah,
this has been my attitude
yeah,
with a lot of this. I don't feel like when I was in college, I used to feel very threatened by science.
yeah,
I feel very like, oh man, maybe I
yeah,
have to think about this, right?
yeah,
But look, I got a degree in philosophy because I was really into these
yeah,
questions,
yeah,
and and which you can get the same level of knowledge just by going to the library and checking out books. But I'm just
yeah,
putting it out there. But um, and I took some interesting classes on the philosophical underpinnings of science,
mm,
uh, scientific revolutions. But
yeah,
Blackhead talked about it, and the idea there is that sometimes science has these theories, and they build and they build and they build upon it for a long time. But
yeah,
then it's like that game of Jenga, right? Someone pulls the wrong stick out, and the whole thing
yeah,
collapses. And then we have new theories that come along,
yeah,
and so science is actually a series of
mm,
revolutions that happen where they take the old system and they throw it up. I mean, I remember as a kid laughing at the absurd notions of people in the Middle Ages. How could anybody really believe that using leeches was an effective medical cure, right?
yeah,
Right, because we were taught to laugh at that kind of stuff. We were taught to
yeah,
laugh at absurd things that people. But wait a second, in their days, like that was true.
yeah,
That was like absolute fact for them. Those
yeah.
were uncontestable theories. They're uncontestable theories until they are contestable. And
Or till somebody contests them.
well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
They become contestable. Well, really, what happens is that as you use a theory, I think the problem is that um, as it gets used over time to explain things, at some point, some of these theories run out the ability to explain phenomena that we observe.
Yeah.
And then we start finding out that there are actually not only can it no longer explain certain things, but the things it's explained before can actually be explained better with a different way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And so my thought is that science is ultimately always in a process of becoming.
Yeah.
It's in a process of developing itself and realizing itself.
Yeah.
And there's no reason for me to take something that is transitory
Yeah.
that because it hasn't gotten to the answer yet, right?
Yeah.
I say it's transitory because it hasn't got an
Yeah.
answer. We made some conclusions for sure.
Yeah.
There's no reason for me to take that and then doubt the Torah, which is eternal,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is not changed. And we talked about that before. We talked about how
Yeah.
we have the Seder Olam, the history of the Torah has always been. We
Yeah.
have evidence that is very strong. For example, the national revelations of God at Mount Sinai, the national experience of the Jewish people coming out of the land of Israel, the prophetic realization of the regathering of the Jewish people to the land of Israel.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of those elements that actually proclaim that God exists and that the Torah is true. And so there's no reason for me to take something that's ultimately theory. And honestly, nobody cares about scientific theory from
Yeah.
this standpoint. I'm going to qualify what I'm saying. I
Yeah.
know there are people. I know there's some people who might be listening, going, "Oh, what did he say?" You know, we don't really care about science. What we care about is technology,
Yeah.
and science sometimes is more or less an effective way of triggering our
Mm.
imagination to
Yeah.
find answers to problems, to
Yeah.
create new technology, and that's what it's really good for. And
Yeah.
I can give an example of this. For example, people. It used to be people people who were in the natural sciences and believed in the Bible would sometimes use the Bible to come up with theories about the world, and
Mm.
sometimes they turned out to be true. Like the book of Psalms talks about the highways in the seas, right?
Yeah. The currents.
The
Yeah.
current. It turns out that that's true. Now
Yeah.
then, if now then, look, if a person who believes in science only wants to come to me and say, look, that was just poetic speak. It was a coincidence, yada yada yada. Right? It was just more of an inspiration. It happened to be right. Right? If they want to say it to me, that's fine. I can accept that. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I can also accept that maybe some of the discoveries and science and technologies created in science because of the science was more because it was a coincidence, because it was an inspiration for a different way of
Yeah.
thinking about things.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
that's that's
yeah.
my non-scientific thought about science.
Yeah. Um, when if you want to learn maybe a little bit more for the maybe the science aspect of creation or whatever, there is a thing network out there called the Genesis Science Network. Now,
Mhm.
it's Christian based, so but they do take a lot from the Torah, the Old Testament, the Torah, the Talmud. What's there the books besides the first four? The
It's called the whole thing's called the Tanakh.
the Tanakh. Okay,
Yeah,
I always I know the Torah, which is the first five books, and then I forget the
that's okay.
Tanakh.
That's okay.
Tanakh. I'm gonna have to try and remember that.
You can just call it Hebrew scriptures if you want to. That's also a good way to say it.
Yeah. Okay.
It'll be
Um,
easier.
but with that said, maybe we should try and get back on track because we are way off in left field. I think we're out of the ballpark at this point.
Well, this is your fault again. Like I was staying on target, and then
Yes, I will take the blame.
you brought up all this stuff about science and evolution, and then I can't resist those kind of conversations. I used to think about this stuff all the time.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so we're Genesis 1:5, or did we finish that? Maybe we're in one
I think
six.
I think we can move on from there. So make sure I don't skip, which I thought was really fascinating.
Mom, if you're gonna be in here, close my door.
Why?
Cause I like the door closed when I'm doing stuff like this.
Nobody else here.
Yeah, well, Although I should close my closet door too. Either that or move him a little.
Okay, so let's move on to verse 6. So
Okay.
it says that God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide between water and water." On the second day, God commanded that there be a firmament in the heavens. The waters congealed out of terror of God's word, just like a person startled by the sound of a lion. At this time, all of creation consisted of water. God then commanded that a firmament be made, dividing this water. Part was on top, another part was on the bottom, and the firmament was in the middle. The distance between the earth and the firmament is the same as that between the firmament and the upper waters. This is the meaning of the verse, that there be a firmament between the midst of the waters. That's just a pretty obvious thing that we talk
Yeah.
about, is that there's a separation between the lower waters and the upper waters. And then during Noah's flood, the upper waters came down and was part of what
Yeah.
flooded the earth.
As well as the fountains of the deep broke
The,
open.
right, the fountains of the deep as well. Yep. Verse 7, God made the firmament. He divided between the waters that are below the firmament and between the waters that are above the firmament. It was so. Um, so I don't know if I want to go into some of this. Some of this is interesting, but it might be a little bit kind of like rabbit traily. Uh,
Yeah. Rabbit trails. Well, read it and hopefully we can
well, it's a
resist.
bit it's a bit long, so I don't want to go in. I don't like just reading stuff. I want to read enough that we can talk about it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to kind of skip that. It's interesting, but I mean, I don't, it's already a quarter till, and it's getting my sleepy time.
Yeah. And what book are you reading out of again for people?
Oh, this one I'm reading the Torah anthology, and I know you can't see it. It's called Me'om Loaz in Hebrew, and this is a series of books that, I mean, it's a huge series. It costs hundreds of dollars to purchase the whole series. For Jews, it's really great because it takes everything. It takes commentaries that are more of a pashat or simple explanation. It includes midrashes sometimes. Some interesting things to be said about the first pharaoh when we get there. Um, it includes halakha, Jewish law, and sometimes it'll bring up Jewish law in connection to the things that are being read here. So, a rabbi friend of mine said, if you want to have a good understanding of Judaism, you read this entire series from book one all the way to the end
Yeah.
in Chronicles.
And do they
Uh,
have it in like audiobook form?
no,
Rats. I think that would be a bestseller. Or certainly
yeah.
help some people anyways.
Well, if I had it years ago, I would have loved it in audio form. With all the driving I used to do, it would have been great.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody should
God,
do that.
yeah. God called the firmament heaven. It was evening and it was morning, the second day. Now, here's the great issue here. What does it not say?
God said that it was good.
Yeah, it's the only day that he doesn't say that.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because it's the work of the second day is unfinished, and it
Hmm.
isn't finished until the next day. And the reason why is ultimately everything that we've got here, they're separating from one thing to another thing. And water separates from land, from dry land.
Yeah.
And it hasn't separated. So right now, on day two, the only thing it did was separate from itself,
Yeah.
right? And
It's
what we
like
want,
having a house half built.
yeah,
You don't say the house is good till it's built. If it's half built, you can't say it's good because it's not done.
right. It's not done, so you can't. It's not a house. It's not even a house yet.
Yeah.
Also, one of the things that is interesting in this area is that the status of the Earth at this point is completely. The Earth is completely covered in water, and this harkens back to me to the time of Noah. when the entire earth is covered in water once more.
Yeah.
I've always found it interesting that it is possible to read the beginning of Genesis as in a beginning. God created the heavens and earth. And the reason why I find it interesting, a really interesting possibility, is because when we start off, the world is covered by water. If if Noah had not found grace in God's eyes, then the earth would have been completely covered in water. Now, what would God have done next?
It's hard to tell.
Well, is there any point in a big, globe of water hanging in space? I mean,
Mm,
ultimately, why did God create the world?
yeah.
He created the world because he wanted to. So we say, like the Ramchal kind of puts it down in like a pretty good understanding. He
Mm,
says that God wanted to give a gift, and that most perfect gift was Himself. But he wanted to give this gift to someone who could appreciate it, and that
yeah.
was someone who could refuse the gift. And so that's why God created human beings who have free will. Now, the danger of giving us free will is that ultimately we can completely refuse the gift.
Yeah.
And we can, right? In that case, there's no point in us existing any longer. So, what if, this is speculating, but what if at one
Yeah.
point, before humans came along, there was another group of beings who were also had this opportunity to earn this gift, but they said no.
Yeah.
And then we're picking up here in Genesis at the point after they've been wiped out. Now we're starting a new race of people called human beings. That's wild and weird, but
Yeah.
I think it's just an interesting speculation on
Yeah.
my part. I'm not saying that's what the text says. I'm just saying it's just kind of interesting that when the punishment is to turn the world back into what it was before the days of creation,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Before the separations.
the only thing that I would say, yeah, the water is all there, but you would still have land underneath the water. Did you have land underneath the water
Yeah,
beforehand?
sure. Because otherwise, what are you separating? You can't separate water from land if the land isn't there already.
I guess so.
Stop making me uncomfortable. I, it's I know these are probably kind of weird thoughts to you, but
Yeah.
I find it interesting to sit there and think about these things because,
Yeah.
um, well, look, ultimately, if I believe that to be true, it wouldn't
Yeah.
ultimately affect what I'm supposed to do with my
Yeah.
life. It has
Yeah.
it has zero effect on what I'm supposed to do. And I
Yeah.
and I and I say this as well. Like for example, with the Messiah, when we talk about the Mashiach, the Messiah, from our understanding, the day before the Messiah shows up, we're supposed to be keeping the Torah.
Yeah.
The day the Messiah shows up, we're still supposed to be keeping the Torah. And after it's been a while, the Messiah is still here. We're still keeping the Torah. The Messiah does not affect us keeping the Torah. We're always supposed to keep the Torah.
Yeah.
And so I always look at these kinds of things like, well, if my thoughts went in this direction, would that ultimately affect what my responsibilities are in
Yeah.
life? And if the answer is no, then it's like, oh, it's an interesting thought. I don't
Yeah.
feel threatened by it. I think
Yeah.
sometimes people feel threatened by ideas,
Yeah.
you know, and there's no need to.
True.
Verse 10, God called the dry land earth and the gathering of waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. And I'm and interesting stuff. Verse 11, God said, "Let the earth grow grass, seed-bearing plants, fruit tree bearing fruit, its own kind, and seed in it. On the earth it was so."
Hmm.
12 and 13. The earth grew grass, plants yielding seed of its kind, and trees bearing fruit, which has its seed in it in its kind. And God saw that it was good. It was evening and morning, the third day. And so here we have it is good happening twice, right? The separation of the waters and the earth is good.
Yeah.
That's the completion of day 2. And then what's good next is the growing forth of the grasses, the
Uh,
plants yielding seeds, the fruit trees, right?
uh,
So now this is the interesting part. So here we're not really separating anything. We're not really separating one thing from another. Now we've entered into the generation,
mhm.
the pure process of generating life,
Yeah.
which is vegetation. I heard something really funny a few years ago. Jaden Smith, Will Smith's son,
Yeah.
said that sharks were older than no trees were older than sharks, right? I go, oh, the kid's been smoking something, and then I went and found out he was saying was true. And I said, well, I was like, well, why am I even shocked? I mean, in the Torah, that's the setup. The setup is that the right the trees and everything come before the creation of
Eh,
fish,
yeah.
right? So I mean, maybe he stumbled upon something very profound there. I don't know.
Yeah. Uh, I'm trying to think. Although I don't want to go down the rabbit trail about, oh, I, I think the vegetation comes first, even in science, but or in evolution.
Well, not in the seas. They're supposedly in sea life. I mean, life comes from water, is I think the scientific viewpoint.
Yeah.
But um, but we're talking about specifically the creation of fish,
Yeah.
and he was talking about sharks. The sharks are fish, and
Yeah.
were fish generated before uh, plant life? No, they're generated after plant life.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
I know they were. I'm not sure within the. I couldn't remember one way or another in the
right,
evolutionary standpoint, because those fish need something to eat.
right, they do.
Mom, you don't know what we're talking about. we're just.
Well, I think
Yeah, Halal said he had heard a comment by Jaden Smith, Will Smith's son, a few years back, saying that trees were older than sharks, and the thing surprised him at first, and he went back to Torah and realized, yeah, that is the way it is.
well, I
Um,
also looked it up online too. I looked it up online. I
yeah,
said, "Are sharks older than trees?" And the answer was yes. So I was like, "Oh,
yeah,
that's interesting." And then I went to the tour and I went, "Oh, well, that makes sense. What was I confused about?"
yeah. And I'm just wondering about the, because most likely and I could be, this is speculation on my part, he would probably believe in evolution. So that's why made me think in
Right.
evolution, which way is it for, at least plants and animals?
Yeah. Again, I retreat back to my position. They
Yeah,
weren't there to see it, so do they really know?
yeah,
That's kind of my.
yeah.
I know people would say that I'm being. I'm just kind of like shutting my eyes to science, but I think that
Well,
what I'm saying is I'm recognizing the boundaries of science.
yeah. Well, evolution technically isn't science. It's a belief held by most scientists, but
Well, we can say it's a scientific theory. I don't
yeah,
mind saying that.
that I can possibly go with. It's just
Um,
because, nobody can prove it. It's all in the past. Nobody's ever observed it. And
well,
the scientific method is to observe, study, repeat, all that stuff.
science doesn't have to prove evolution.
Yeah,
And I think that I think that what happens is that there's this everybody's very overly sensitive about the topic.
yeah,
Like people get threatened by it. People who believe in the 6 days of creation threatened by the scientific reckoning of the universe, age of the universe, and things like that.
yeah,
And the people who believe in a 6 days, literal 6 day of creation, as being fools and idiots, and so on and so forth.
yeah.
They'll be upset. And the people who believe in the 6 days of creation feel like the scientists are godless, which is generally true. Um, but I mean, I don't know that. But at the end of the day, I don't think it really matters. Let's say that the scientific theory of evolution was true. What does that ultimately affect? I mean, what would that challenge?
Um, Probably a couple things, but
Like
depending on,
what?
well, I guess for the more for I guess it would be more for the Christians to affect something because it has death possibly coming before life. I'm not sure how to explain it before the fall and all that. So then for Christians and part of Christ's sacrifice means nothing. I'm not sure how to word it
Well,
exactly.
let,
I'm
let me
getting
let me ask you this, Rick, and just to, um, it says in the Torah that
uh,
God created Adam and Eve, right?
yeah.
Okay, where does it say that there weren't humans that already existed anyway?
Well, Adam is called the first man, I believe. I'm not sure whether that's in Torah in the Hebrew scriptures. I'm pretty sure it is, but I could be wrong. But I'm positive it's in the New Testament that Adam is called the first man. So,
Right. Okay. Well, maybe that's a problem with the New Testament. But I'm just saying that I feel like
mm,
I feel like that there's that number one, he doesn't have to be the first man. He
mm,
has to be he has to be the person who is specifically put in the Garden of Eden.
mm-hmm,
We recognize that there are animals in Eden and there are animals outside of Eden, and the animals outside of Eden are called behemoth. They're like wild animals,
yeah,
whereas the animals in Eden are supposedly much more like gentle and more domestic in certain ways. So,
mm,
I mean, like I'm not saying this because I necessarily I believe it. I'm saying I'm just trying to open up a possibility here
yeah.
where
You're
there's
you're
no
just
real,
you're just presenting all the different theories, and it's up to people to believe what they will.
like ultimately. Look, the thing is that most people
Yeah,
who engage in this theory of this discussion of science versus religion
yeah,
aren't qualified. The
yeah,
religious people generally aren't qualified because they don't know anything about science, and the
yeah,
scientists aren't generally qualified because they don't know much about religion.
yeah,
Most of the atheists that I've met in my time have at whatever point in their lives they became atheists, that's where their knowledge of religion stopped.
yeah,
And so they have very shallow understandings of the Bible and
yeah,
religion. I
yeah,
hear them making very like very basic, uninteresting challenges
yeah,
and into the Bible. So I think what we have to recognize is take a step back and both
yeah.
sides recognize that we can't really argue against something that we don't understand,
True.
and we shouldn't be threatened by that then either. There's no
Yeah,
reason to be threatened by it, and
yeah,
the pursuit of science isn't ultimately about whether there's a God or not. The pursuit of
yeah.
science is how do we make nature bend to
How?
our will? How do we
Uh,
understand nature?
yeah. How do we understand the world around us?
But I think ultimately what people really care about is not science but
Mm,
technology.
yeah,
And
especially
techno-
nowadays.
and technology isn't necessarily beholden to scientific methods or anything like that.
No. Uh, Something happened.
Yes, well, it's 10 o'clock anyway. I probably
Yeah.
need to get going. So
Yeah. So we ended on what verse there? Were we in
so we
verse?
ended on verse 13. So we're gonna start at 114 through 19. We're gonna try to do that next week.
Okay.
And
Yeah. Yeah. Next week, I think we should. Well, in 2 weeks, I'm not going to be able to make it next week.
okay,
Um. Yeah. But yeah, before we ended the last time we ended on 19, so maybe we'll end the next time we do this on 19, try to. That way if we want to go really in depth, like we were beforehand, we can.
right.
You know, this is
I
these few
yeah.
weeks are a catch up to where we were, I guess.
Right, right. Well, I don't mind going going depth if like if I feel like I have something to say. Like sometimes I
Yeah.
look at it and I go, well, I don't have much to say, and
Yeah.
and I'm hesitant sometimes to get
Yeah.
overly technical about certain things because I
Yeah.
think that there are people who watch that and listen to it and get impatient because they're like, well,
Yeah.
just tell me what the answer is, And I've been literally told that. I've been told, so, I go, well, there's this possibility, this possibility. Just tell me what the answer is. It's like, well, I'm sorry, that's
You
not how it
can't do
works.
that for you. You have to come
That's
to
not
that
how
conclusion.
it works.
Yeah. But
So,
I know. Last time, when we were studying before, we were going almost word for word with the translation and all that.
right.
I sort of like that. I know we skipped over
Oh,
a little
okay.
bit here and there because, like you said, not going every word, doing every single word. Sometimes you know, it's the word thou. How much can be said in the word thou?
Well, look, if you have any questions though too, I mean, you
Yeah,
can also ask those when we
yeah,
begin. Even if I don't know the answer, I can try to look it up.
yeah,
But yeah, just uh, look at things. If you see something in the text and you're confused by it, just let me know.
yeah,
We'll talk about it. But
yeah.
yeah, we can slow down a little bit. It's fine.
Yeah, yeah. I just once we get to 19, because I was just looking up while we were on here. Where did we get to last time?
Right, right.
Because
Yeah,
on all my thumbnails, I put from what verse to what verse we went to.
right, right,
So I just had to look at the thumbnails of the ones before Esther, and it's like, okay, that's where we got to.
right. I just didn't want to spend forever in Genesis 1:1 like we did last time.
Yeah,
I was like, because I think that I do want to move it forward because honestly, my ambition with us studying together is not to spend forever in Genesis, but to actually work our way into the rest of the Hebrew scriptures,
yeah.
get into
Same here.
the prophets and everything else as well.
Yeah, and I
So,
think, as I said before, I think after we get out of Genesis 2, things
yeah,
we're going to start to probably speed up through Genesis 2 a little bit, but even with Genesis after Genesis 2, like the fall, you know, you hear, you know, Adam's account and then the fall and then them being thrown out. I think things will speed up a lot from there because yeah, there's probably stuff to get from all the stories, events, but I don't think you need it as much word for word except for maybe some verses.
yeah. Okay. Well, that sounds good, and we'll pick this up in 2 weeks, I guess.
Yeah, 2 weeks. And you want anything to promote before I end?
Well, I am newherocomics.com, and I've got my novel, my comic book, my coloring books. Those are all up for sale and available. And that's pretty much what's going on for me.
Cool. And I will do record my outro after. So I'm just gonna start. Hey, hey, hey! How are you? What an amazing show! We learned a lot. Hopefully, we went, of course, as you know now, to 13. Well, you saw the thumbnail, as I said in the intro. But covered lots of stuff. We got from verse 5 to verse 15. That's a lot, and of course, you know, we did a whole bunch of rabbit trails and stuff. So it was what it was. I think it turned out good. Let me know your thoughts and everything in the description. And remember to like, share, subscribe if you're not subscribed so you know when this or maybe other stuff I do is going up. And of course, ring that bell for notification. So, I guess that's it for now. We will, of course, see you in the next one. So, God bless. Have a great and wonderful day.